All right. So thank you all for being here today. This is our second in a three-part series on dog body language. Um, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Like Kate said, we've got a hard stop, so we want to get through it all. And if you want to go ahead and just jump to the other slide, or next slide, I should say. I'm going to quickly go through our agenda, and then I'll hand it over to the star of the show, Kate.
Oh, you're
Uh,
gonna do. Sorry, I'm jumping around.
You're jumping around. No, it's good. So we'll do some really quick introductions. I'm gonna quickly talk about our affiliate program, and then from there, Kate is gonna dive into the why behind this webinar, and then the bulk of the webinar, which is the emotion behind the signals that we see in our dogs. So you want to switch slides. With that, I'm Morgan Rivera. I know I've chatted with many of you. I see a lot of names I recognize in the chat. So it's nice to see you all. I'm our Senior Manager of Shelter Partnerships. I'm a CPD TKA. I have a master's degree in shelter medicine, and there's not much in life I'm as passionate about as I am dog body language and the emotion behind it and the things that we're talking about today. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited you're all here. And Kate, you want to go ahead and I think most people probably are familiar with you by now, but
Hopefully, if not, I'm Kate Hembry. I'm a retired certified veterinary technician with a specialty in behavior and a Karen Pryor training partner. And I've been the head of training and Good Pup behavior specialist here at Good Pup for the past 6 years.
yay. Okay, you want to hop to the next slide?
Mhm.
So, like I mentioned, I'll keep this really fast. I just wanted to touch on our affiliate program. If you are here today and you are affiliated with a shelter or rescue, my hope is that you are part of our affiliate program. It is our goal to help you support your community by providing another avenue for people to access our positive dog training. As I think we all know, it's extremely important and valuable, and it has historically been a challenging resource to get access to. So the programs, it's free to you. It costs nothing to join if you're not already a partner. And it's free to the client in the beginning, at least. They get their first week for free, and then they get a discount for as long as they continue with training. By partnering with us, you can share this resource with anyone in your community. Sometimes people think it's only for adopters. That's not the case. You can share it with adopters, fosters, intake diversion clients, anyone that you believe would potentially benefit from access to our positive training. And then Kate and her team work extremely hard to make sure that all of our training is tailored to the needs of the individual person, the dog, the environment that they're in, all of that. They look at the whole picture, and they come up with very custom tailored individual plans to keep everyone on track and set them up for success to the best of our abilities. So we love providing these webinars as another one of the free resources that we provide. It's very aligned with our mission, which is just helping to spread knowledge and access to our positive training. We're able to provide this for free because of partners like you all. So please keep telling your communities about us. Every time they sign up, then that allows us to just keep doing what we're doing. So with all of that, if you have questions, of course, reach out. You can sign up on our website. You can email us. Happy to answer any questions you have. And I will not take up any more time. Kate, take it away.
Okay. All right. So today we are talking about body language, but we are looking or diving in more to the emotion behind those signals, right? So if you guys were able to join us last time, we talked about just being able to identify different parts of the dog as far as signals to look for and to catch, components really, which can also include their voice as well, and movement too, a variety of things. But today, and we touched on a little last time, what they mean. Today, we're going to dive in even deeper into that. I want to start again with just revisiting why we want to be discussing body language and getting to know what it is. Because, as we just said, if we can identify the signals, we can interpret really the emotion behind them, ideally, right? That allows us to know what our dogs want, what they need. That can help us better communicate with them It also helps us know when they're open to learning, so we can teach them better ways to address situations, other ways to give signals and communicate. And ultimately, the end result of this is that it can actually decrease the risk of some of those unwanted behaviors that we don't want, which are signals that come from sometimes the emotions that those dogs are experiencing. Now, as we walk through it today, there's 4 emotions that we're going to talk about, but I do want everybody to just take into mind that really today the goal is to kind of see how body language helps us assess our dogs, that it's fluid and we can actually watch it kind of move and progress through various stages. And that's how I hope you guys can leave here looking at it from that. That being said, we won't revisit every signal we did last time, but there are some. We're going to talk more about the process through them. And oh my goodness, these computers, Morgan, I hate them when they flip this screen and now I can't get back. Let's see. Bear with me, guys. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Uh-oh. Do you want to make me the host and have me advance for you?
Um, it did this last time and all I had to do was click over here to get it, and I don't know why it won't let me do that this time.
Eesh.
Let's try.
All right.
Ah, okay, got it. Sorry. Um, apologies, everybody. But as I was saying with the signals, the reason I bring up how fluid they are and that they progress is they can move towards stress, towards emotions, and they can move out of those. That's because signals can have multiple meanings. Individual dogs can use the same signal multiple times, right? And dogs show those signals a little differently based on their conformation and morphologically how they're built. So keep that in mind as we are moving through here. But the 4 emotions that I wanted to talk about today that I think are the best way to kind of assess how we can use reading body language to assess where our dogs are at is happy and calm, stress, anxiety, and fear. And again, the reason I've chose these is because I think they're the best way to help you guys depict how body language can be used, how we can assess it. There's a variety of emotions that dogs experience just like us. Some are controversial, but these everybody tends to agree on. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about the easy one to start with, which is our happy and our relaxed dogs. This illustration, which is by Crafty Canine Club, and you'll see I've got several in here, starts us off with just some of those basic looks at a happy dog, right? So we're looking for ears that are up or in their normal carriage position, heads held high, mouth open, generally loose tongues. These dogs generally have a loose stance, weights on distributed on all 4 feet. Now, in this picture, you guys will see they have it depicted as the tail is down. And the picture doesn't do this justice, but most tails, if they are down, because happy dogs, we want generally tails level at the back. Now you can see relaxed dogs where they would have the normal carriage of their tail. And that can just be held down, but it's not, I said held's the wrong word, it hanging down. So it's loose. It's generally away from the body. And we'll look at that a little closer so that everybody's on the same page with that. But you can see in the pictures here depicted that we've got some of the signals we identified earlier in our last webinar on body components, right? So direct facing in the first picture, the dog has soft eyes. There's no furrowed brow. The ears are forward, but they're not tensely forward, right? It's more of an interest. The mouth is open in that V curve that we like to see, and we have that loose tongue hanging out. And the other thing that I kind of want to point out with this dog is the dog is also laying down. This is a signal that a lot of people don't recognize, but down can be quite a compromising position for dogs. And so for a dog to be in a ventral or dorsal down is a big indicator of where they're sitting and a signal really of their emotion. So keep that in mind too. But Dogs, happy dogs are just that. They're happy. Right? These dogs, they're content. They are unconcerned about things that are happening in their environment. The middle dog you can see has those splayed out frog legs, so the loose body, probably a puppy. But again, a V mouth with that tongue hanging out, soft eyes. And then we have the dog on the end. Now we have some dorsal recumbency, so this dog is comfortable, they're relaxed. And we have an open mouth, probably a little more open than what we like, and a little more teeth showing than maybe what we like. But that's also the dog's upside down, keep in mind. So we've got the lips are hanging down. And if you look at their legs on the dorsal recumbency, right, they're splayed out, right? So they're loose, they're not closed. And you'll also see, if you guys look, kind of that side eye. So while I would look at this dog and say that they are happy, they are probably playing and slightly aroused. And we're going to talk about that because arousal indicates that we probably have some physiologic response happening, some internal response with hormones. So we want to keep that in mind. Now, as far as our happy dogs, these are the dogs that ideally we want to approach, we want to say hello to, we want to love on. But again, because uh, body language can be fluid, we want to pay attention to this. Some dogs are very happy as long as they are not approached. And then as soon as they are, it can change, right? So it's important, even with our happy dogs that we think we want to interact with or want to interact with us, that we look for consent signals, okay? And consent signals are just like what they sound. They're permission to engage, permission to interact. And the reason I point this out is because I've seen happy dogs, and the minute an engagement starts that maybe they didn't want, even though people thought they could engage because the dog appeared happy, we don't have the signals we want anymore. We get stress signals. So one way to always ensure that what you're reading is correct, especially when engaging with a dog, is to look for those consent signals. That's the dog coming into your space, right? Having that loose body movement, the loose face, like the soft face on the right with the golden retriever. Dogs often flop down in front of you when they want to be petted. So the dog on the ground, his legs are splayed wide open, right? He's actively wanting that engagement. And you can also see this with play bows, with play, whether it's with a human or with a dog. Again, the dog is consenting to engage with you and play. And then the biggest one really is that dog soliciting interaction, affection from you on their own. And you can even actually apply what is deemed now a consent test, right? So if you are unsure, or if you think maybe you shouldn't have approached or invaded the dog's space, you're second guessing yourself based on other signals, because remember, they change and they may not always be exactly as we interpret them because they can be used differently. You can always remove the engagement for just a couple seconds, take away your hands, and see what the dog does. If they push back into your space, they are wanting that engagement. That is true consent on their end. And so then you can continue forward. And I did want to take a quick second to just talk about the play, which we also see with our happy dogs, right? Like that dog in the picture that was in the dorsal recumbency. So another great illustration, excuse me, by Crafty Canine Club. So most of us have probably see that play bow that we're all familiar with play, where we have that front end or lowered bent forearms. And then we generally have those open mouths with tongues hanging out. The hind ends generally up in the air. Our tails are normally broadly waving, although they can be down and waving too. You've got to think about the conformation of the dog in these situations. And often we will see some dilated pupils because play is arousing, right? And so when I say arousing, I'm suggesting that the body itself has started to release some hormones, whether that's due to excitement and we have some adrenaline for play, or maybe we have some cortisol because the dog is a little worried. What happens when the body releases those is that our signals become a bit more intense, right? Depending on the situation we're in. And that's important to note as we move through this webinar. But specifically, when we talk about play, it happens when both dogs understand and read the other dog's signals. And this can be between people and dog as well. What we're wanting to see really is that nice give and take between dogs. Okay, so these signals tend to be repetitive signals, play bows back and forth, pawing, barking at each other. You can get that sniff, quick sniff and dash away, or the bounce away, or you can have the circling, right? Back and forth circling, right? All of these are non-threatening because our dog's coming in and then moving back. And then additionally, the other thing we want to take note here as far as why we want to look for that give and take and that both dogs are offering it is because really these dogs are one, communicating, and two, they are self-regulating where they're at in their level of play, right? So play has some arousal. We've discussed this, excitement, adrenaline coming in. And if adrenaline continues and arousal and dogs become more aroused, we can run into miscommunications or mixed signals between dogs. So it's important that we're looking at what those signals are between the two and that we're noticing the give and take so that the dogs are actually auto-regulating themselves with the play. It becomes problematic, of course, when dogs don't recognize or respond to each other's signals. And it's also tends to be problematic when we have those dogs that play really, really intensely because they've never learned how to auto-regulate their emotions when they're playing, right? That excitement behind it. So one of the cool things, and Morgan can probably attest to this even more than me, is that you can even teach dogs that play intensely how to start to regulate that adrenaline behind the play. And you can do this simply by keeping play sessions extremely short, 20 or 30 seconds, and interrupting on your own, and then communicating with the dog with cues, right? So as much as we're talking about learning dog language, we want them to learn English as well. And that can kind of really help. We have the play and we're intense, and then we pull them away and we have to think and we have to respond and we get a treat. And it just kind of brings our dogs back down, and then they can go back to play. And then we interrupt again. And that's what that auto-regulation is that we want to see with our dogs. Because what we don't want to start to run into is seeing those miscommunication or those stress signals. Okay. So stress signals, everybody experiences stress. Our dogs do too. It's normal, right? And they are those signals that are caused by tension due to generally demanding circumstances or situations, right? So we can start to identify those in play and really any communication, a happy dog, and if they start to display these signals, right? That's the goal is we see these signals, but we always want to see them come back to where we want the dogs to be. Okay, and that's that fluidity that we're looking for. But as you can see in this illustration, some of the signals we might see from stress would be like that closed mouth, the eyes are wide and alert, the ears are forward. You'll have where the dog's positioning, they have more weight forward or backwards, and our tails start to become in different places more active as well. We are going to dive in today and look at a few types of stress signals. And these are going to be some of the signals that we've already reviewed in our last webinar. So if you guys missed that, because I do reference it quite a bit, please go back and take a look. It is free. It is available. You can find it on our website. And so our first signals are our conflict signals. Now, our conflict signals are just that. The dog is in some kind of conflict. We generally see it during situations of frustration for our dogs, where they find themselves in contradiction. Should I approach? Should I not approach? Is that person or dog approaching, or are they not approaching, right? They are literally conflicted. And oftentimes these signals appear really kind of out of context from where we might normally see them, okay? But they are generally normal signals. But you're looking for that conflict that the dog might be experiencing. And so I've just listed a few of the bigger ones here and some of the ones that I think people tend to not recognize that we're going to walk through real fast. But again, keep in mind that these signals can be seen in other areas. Dog can use them at different times. Mounting, as we discussed last time, very rarely, if ever, sexual. Mounting is almost always some type of display due to stress. It is generally because the dog is unsure about a stressor they've seen. It can be directed at someone beside them who has, or a dog beside them who has no relation to the stress, or can be directed on the stressor. But it is a very common conflict signal. Yawning, very rarely do our dogs yawn because they are tired. Almost always, if a dog is yawning, they are actually upset about something. They're stressed about something. Turn away. This is a big one that people do not recognize as a signal for stress. It's very mild most of the time. The dogs might not even be this close to the other dog or to you or to the stressor when they do this. They may be a ways away, so it may just look like they're looking elsewhere, but it could actually be a turn away. Freezing is another big one we see. I think many people, most likely, many of us have already observed this with play. The dog freezes right before they pounce or circle or paw because what are we going to do? What are you going to do? What are we doing here? Right? But freezing is another one that we often see with guarding behaviors with dogs. And guarding in and of itself is about conflict, right? Are they going to take my toy? Are they going to take my food? Are they going to leave? And it is actually an anxiety-driven behavior, which we'll talk about due to the conflict. The whale eye. And this is really more of a side eye. Again, another one that I think people miss frequently. Um, Most people would not see this, right? This is small, it's minor. But if you look closely, this dog is very concerned about his toy. And we've got an ear that's being held slightly back, definitely side eye and a furrowed brow, right? So this dog is communicating he is in conflict over what may or may not happen with that toy. And squinting, another very common one that I think is overlooked. If it is not bright and sunny where you are at, or the sun is not in the dog's face, that should be paid attention to. And scratching, as we said, there's lots of normal dog behaviors that can be displayed because of conflict. I think I told the story last time about the Great Dane at one of the hospitals I've worked at over the years, who walked in the door and immediately started scratching as if he was having an allergic reaction. And the owner said, "Oh, he must be allergic to something in this room." But he literally had just come in the front door. And I suspect it had more to do with him being stressed about where he was. And of course, we have our front paw raise. This is a sign of apprehension. The dog is unsure what is about to happen. Again, conflict. And while this picture is about that paw raise, you can see it in the rest of the dog, right? The eyes that appear dilated and slightly furrowed brow, and definitely have one ear out to the side and one ear back, mouth closed as well. So lots of signals there that we had identified that can show signs of stress. And you can have additional signs of stress too. You can have lip licks, we've talked about. It's a distance increasing one, but it's generally one of conflict, and they want the stressor to go away. As I mentioned earlier, lying down. Lying down can show that a dog is happy. It can also be a dog disengaging because they're unsure about the situation. And sniffing, which we're going to talk about quite a bit as well. Sniffing is a big one. You will see dogs sniff out of conflict, displacement, and as part of appeasement or calming too. And we're going to talk about why I think we see it so much, but I can't tell you how many times I see dogs on leashes that person stops to chat with someone, or stops to check their mailbox, or stops to look at something, I don't know, in a store window, and the dog's sniffing the ground. And it's not always because there's an intriguing smell there. Sometimes they're just a little unsure about what's happening or what they're doing. Okay, displacement signals are another big stress signal. Again, signals can have multiple meanings. So you'll see a lot of these listed several times, and I don't even begin to list all the signals you can have. But displacement, generally those signals that we see, they are moving signals. The dog is actively moving. The reason that is because these signals, which can also be normal and out of context, but they're actually suppressing an urge to do or not to do. We may not necessarily know, but they're suppressing something. And dogs will use it rather than engage in what is stressing them. So sneezing is one of those. You will see sneezing generally and scratching go hand in hand. I used to have a Chesapeake. Every time she met somebody, she would sneeze about 8 to 10 times in between all of that, scratching ferociously. Imagine that, a Chesapeake worried about people. Spinning, the dogs that chase their tails. This is another big displacement signal. I I think that this one may start, again, when you think about suppressing an urge, right? I see this a lot with my really excited or happy dogs. And I suspect that in some of those cases, there have been other behaviors, maybe such as barking or jumping, ones that might be less desirable, that dog may have been punished for, even if it was, a simple, hey, no, let's not do that, but punished. And they found this behavior to do. And many times guardians think this is cute and it got reinforced, right? So then it becomes this displacement behavior to give to suppress those other urges. Again, those are my suspicions based on my experience, not a fact, but definitely a displacement signal. The phantom chewing, this is those dogs that turn and chew ferociously at themselves all of a sudden because it's almost like they've been bit by something, but they haven't. My Anatolian does this when the kids are moving around the house really fast. Amazing, huh? When you start to pay attention. And sniffing. Here's my sniffing again, and we're going to talk about it one more time. Sniffing is another displacement signal. Again, that the dog is using to suppress potentially other urges. Um, Now, the sniffing itself, part of the reason I think we see it, and part of the reason I have brought this up as well, is because there's so much research now out there about sniffing is not only a signal for our dogs, it's also a way to actually help them lower their stress, that it impacts them cognitively at the brain level and helps them calm down. And so I think more often than not, that is why we see it as a stress signal, because it's not only a signal, but it's something that the dog is using to help them in that scenario. Because regardless of who's stressed or why we're stressed, we want to try to decrease it or change that. Other movement displays that are commonly seen as displacement signals can include pacing, digging, the shadow chasers, but chasing, fly snapping, licking is a very common one. You can sometimes have those dogs that get into the sucking behaviors, and we have our scratching and our mounting again. And the challenge with displacement signals is because they're suppressing urges, and really it's not just them, it's any signal. It can become a learned pattern, a learned behavior. And we run into, if these dogs are experiencing the stress and using this constantly, this is where we can run into this becoming obsessive patterns. So it's something to think about if we're seeing that. Now, the other stress signal we want to talk about is our appeasement or calming signals. And it's not really ors, but they do fall in the same category. Appeasement signals are about whatever the signal the dog gives, it influences the recipient of the signal, the stressor, in a way that ideally decreases the dog's stress, right? So if I had a dog that gave a lip lick, which was a distance increasing signal, and the stress, the other dog, the person moved away, then that could be interpreted as an appeasement signal because the recipient leaves, and that should then allow my dog's stress to go down if they were being bothered by them. Okay. Calming signals are signals that our dogs use to actually calm themselves down, like sniffing, hence why I have put them together. So let's look at a couple of the more common ones and ones that I think people don't recognize as being potentially a stress signal, because many of these can also just be a normal part of the dog's body language, right? They can become ritualized. A submissive grin does not always mean a dog is stressed. Some dogs will actually smile out of excitement with their owners coming home. My Dachshund does that. But then we do have submissive grins where dogs are stressed. So we want to pay attention to that. Many people might look at this and think that this dog wasn't just stressed, but aggressive. I would argue that this dog is not, because they do not have a furrowed brow, their eyes are soft, and they do not have dilated pupils. So in my opinion, this is maybe a stress signal. It may also, in this picture, not knowing the context, could be the dog seeing someone new that they're happy to see. Here's my sniffing again. So again, the dog uses it as a way to politely disengage from a recipient so that the recipient is not interested in them, right? May go away. So their stress may calm down. Additionally, the sniffing in and of itself can calm our dogs. My averted gaze, here we are again. Dog gives it, shows they're not interested. Ideally, the other dog goes away. So a very big signal. Back turns. This is one that I think is missed a lot again. And I don't see this a ton with dogs, but I do see it a ton with people. And actually, I see it a lot with dogs on leash, where the dog actually is at the end of the leash and has chosen to sit, sometimes even lying down. So little mix of signals there, but they're almost always at the end of the leash. So they've moved away from their owner and have turned to sit sideways or with their back slightly towards whatever their owner is engaging with, generally a person talking. I used to see this actually a lot in the group dog classes. And so it was actually a signal that the dog was trying to get whatever had come over to talk to their owner, or if their owner was talking to a person, to go there, go away. Like, don't pay attention to me, and maybe you'll just go away. So another one to pay attention to. I think most of us are probably pretty familiar with this kind of signaling, right? The cowering. As far as appeasement, this dog is saying, I am nothing you need to worry about. I am small and I am harmless, and please leave me alone. So again, an appeasement signal. You can also, in this situation, right, you can look at other parts of the dog and also see where they're at. We've got an ear that's slightly forward, an ear that's slightly pinned back. That's conflict. I've got dilated pupils. I have a furrowed brow. I have a closed mouth. I have a tail that is not loose hanging from my back legs. If these were my back legs, I have a tail that's tight against my backside. So this dog is worried about something. And then the exposing belly. This is another one where I think there's that old adage, right, that oh, dogs always want to have their belly scratched, but I really don't know that that's often the case. This dog is does not want her belly scratched, and I have seen multiple bites from dogs where people thought they wanted their belly scratched. But exposing belly is an appeasement signal. It's a, I'm here. I'm going to make myself, again, as small as possible, fall into the floor so that you just walk away and leave. I'm not interesting, right? But there are other signals this dog is given. Those front legs are not splayed out like we saw in our happy play dog. They are tucked tight up under that dog's chest. The left rear leg is also coming up and being tucked up further. If you look closely, we have very wide eyes, closed mouth, dilated pupils, and I would suspect, based on this probably being a Yorkie or something close in that terrier family, that the ears normally hang naturally down normally, and that ear is falling backwards, probably because it's being slightly held back. So again, things to look for with that appeasement. And you can have all kinds of signs. You can have dogs vocalize appeasement with whining. You'll see a lot. You can have, again, we've mentioned licking with our displacement behaviors, and it can also be an appeasement behavior. Like, don't worry about me. You'll see dogs lick other dogs' faces. I see dogs lick people for the same reason. Another appeasement behavior, which I think is also somewhat of a calming signal, is that checking, where dogs turn around and check it. My Dachshund does this. He's done it for years, generally after interactions and or after a play session. I think it probably started as maybe a stress or a aroused stress signal about interactions. It has since become a way to probably kind of calm himself down. It's become a ritualized pattern for him. And you can see that with like the wet dog shake-offs too. Same thing. So for all of our signals, as we start to dive in to anxiety here, and actually, I'm going to go back real fast because I missed talking about one thing here as I'm looking at my notes. Our signals, right? We've talked about them being fluid, and the goal is to be able to read dogs and watch them within their mental landscape, how they move, how they maybe move out of happy to stress and back to happy or relaxed, or they move out of happy to stressed to more stressed, right? That's the goal with being able to look at these signals. And again, kind of looking at the context and the whole dog. Because if we know where they're at in that landscape, we can prevent it from getting to a point we don't want to. The thing that I wanted to add that I missed here is that we've talked about some of these signals serving as actual signals that our dogs use to calm themselves down, one being sniffing, right? For me personally, I think my Dachshund uses checking that way now. But there are also other signals that dogs will use. Yawning, very slow, deep yawns, sighs, all again, calming signals that our dogs will use. Slow blinks, slow moving bodies. And the really cool thing, and why I wanted to bring this up about that type of body language, is you can use it when you are communicating with dogs who may not know English yet and may not know cues or may just not know you. And by offering those, you may be able to help a dog calm down. You may be able to help them see things on you that they recognize, and that helps them calm down. So I just wanted to bring that up as well, that you can actually yourself exhibit calming signals when trying to communicate with a dog. Now, as we said, it's fluid and we have this kind of mental landscape of our dogs. And what happens over time when our dogs are repeatedly exposed to stresses is that my stress escalates. It stacks, just like us. We get stacked up with stress and we can kind of explode or implode. And our dogs do the same thing, right? So as our stress is stacking up, they're what they're feeling internally, their hormones, their cortisol, it's escalating, it's increasing. And what we tend to see is our signals then increasing in intensity, right? So that's where we start to see more physiologic responses, and the signals themselves may be more forceful. So this is another good illustration as far as getting us started on a dog who in this situation is stressed and is beginning to show some aroused stress signals towards that emotion of anxiety. Because as that stress builds, as those hormones increase, eventually our dogs tip over threshold into that emotion of anxiety. And at that point, they're responding instinctually to what they feel, to whatever they need to do to communicate or figure out how to help themselves be safe. So let's look at how this progression works, because that's what I really wanted you guys to be able to take away from this, is that we have a dog who is showing stress signals, and we've gone over a variety and a bunch more in our last lecture, and there's a bunch more out there. But just for example, maybe we have lip licks, or we have hiding, or we have sneezing. And these could all be minor signals. But most of them are signals to move away or get away, right? They're unsure or worried about something. So they need stressors to leave, to back off, like the lip lick for distance increasing, or they need to hide to get away, or maybe they're just trying to internally address it, suppress that urge of what they're feeling. If those signs of communication are not recognized, if the stressor does not leave, my dog's going to continue to be stressed, and it's going to start to stack up, and it's going to start to escalate. And now I'm going to have hormones come out, cortisol, and I'm going to get some physiological responses. So these are innate. When I have the physiological response, I'm going to have they're internal, right? So the signals are innate. They're not controlled by the dog. They're a response to what the dog is beginning to feel. So here's where we have penis crowning, piloerection, drooling. In fact, I've got this really cool illustration here made by Vet Behavior Team, where we've shows a lot of ones we've discussed, but also ones we might not think of. Again, those aroused signals due to what's happening internally in the dog. So shedding, urination and defecation. We've talked about several of these. Vomiting can be one. Not taking treats because they're nauseous. If anybody has ever experienced shock, dog could be so upset at this point that they just refuse to eat. I see that a lot when people are working with dogs. There's a balance when they're just before they're really kind of completely out of that learning frame of mind, before they've tipped over threshold into that true emotion. And one of the biggest signals that my dog is tipped over or tipping is that they stop taking treats, or they're not taking them as easily or as quickly, right? They're not as interested in them. So that is really one to pay attention to. And that's going to defeat training and trying to teach them a different way to communicate at that point. So take that into account. Tense muscles, right? Because I've got all this adrenaline running through me, and I can also have permanent looks on my face like grimaces. And you will also see, because we have our blood pressure is pumping, right? We are moving into an emotional, mental state here. You will see red sclera. A lot of time the mucous membranes get extremely red because my blood pressure is running and all the blood vessels are dilated and open. Everything's moving through there. So those are important things to pay attention to. This is the turnaround, turnaround, turnaround. We need to be interrupting. We need to be redirecting. We need to remove the stress, because if we don't, then we now tip over threshold into our emotion of anxiety, and we are going to end up with aggressive signals, which is not what we want, right? So now we've got our true rail eye with our ears back, big C mouth showing all the weapons. The middle picture has dogs with ears pinned back, direct stare, dilated pupils, wide eyes, those lips curled up to show the teeth, again, weapons. The last one, we've got that dog standing stiffly. So there's my tense muscles over their bowl, ears completely pointed out to the side. Those are being held out to the side, showing their teeth, scruffed, furrowed brow, hyaloerection, right? This is not where we want to be, right? Now we've got a dog feeling a level of anxiety that is not helpful, that we don't want them to have to feel, right? Additionally, we have them responding to that anxiety with aggressive signaling, which makes it dangerous, which we also don't want. And the biggest downside is that when we have this scenario, while initially this response, these signals are due to being tipped over and all this emotion and all those hormones running through us, what happens over time is that I don't need the emotion. The signal will just become paired to the stressor. So I will have a dog that uses this to communicate when they see that stressor, whether they are anxious or not. And that is also going to happen with my bites, right? So really important that we can watch our dogs again across this mental landscape, so we can see where they're at based on their body language signals, and when we need to help move them back in that landscape, or down or lower the stress levels, however you want to reference it, so that we don't end up in this spot, because then we're having to backtrack, right? We're having to stop the dog from having this continued stress. Because that's the other thing, is if it continues, right, we have that association. So this is when we stop letting dogs out to eat together if food is the problem. We stop having people walk by if it's a guarding. We use management to prevent them from getting here. If we have leash reactivity that potentially becomes this severe, because you can have anxiety on the leash as well, right? Then we stop leash walks. We need to take a break. We need to lower those hormones. We've got to get rid of those hormones if we want to get rid of the signals, so we don't have that become a learned behavior. And that's what a lot of people, I think, struggle with understanding, is these are just signals. It's just my dog communicating with where they're at. It's an instinctual state based on their mental, where they're at mentally, right? And if I want to get rid of the signal, if I don't want to have it become learned, I have to remove the emotion, which means I have to get rid of the stressor. Now, that being said, stress is normal, right? It's there. So the goal is to remove it, get our dog to a learning frame of mind, work with them repeatedly over and over and over until they can find a better way to communicate with us or to that stressor, depending on what you're dealing with. Now, let's talk about our other big emotion, which is fear. See where we're going on time here. I want to make sure I have enough time to get through everything. So when I have a fearful dog, right, again, I can have some of the same signals. In this case, they've put licks at the face, right? Can be appeasement or displacement behavior. Eye contact might be brief. We might get those paw raises or sweaty paws, right? So we've got a dog who's starting to experience some stress due to feeling threatened or worried about something hurting them, right? So that's my fear. And there can be, again, a variety of signals, starting with those lesser stress signals, right? So we can have the tail, again, parallel. I think I didn't like this, but right up against the hind end. In this case, on this tail, that tail is close to the hind end, and then you'll see the tip is sticking out. So it's almost curled, which suggests to me that tail is very tense, right? They're holding it very stiff. So that's a signal we want to pay attention to. We can have a closed mouth. We can have a dog leaning away. If our dog continues, right, to be exposed to what they think is going to hurt them, what they are concerned is harmful, then those signals are going to heighten, right? My stress keeps stacking and my signals are going to become more intense, right? I'm going to get those aroused signals now that have a physiological component related to them. So we may not be completely tipped over threshold into fear, but we're on our way. And this is a very balanced point here, right? We don't want to go further. We want to come back lower. So we have to watch cautiously with where we're at with our dog's learning state here. So again, some of the signals we might see, mounting, the lunging, mouthiness. This is where we get that mouthiness. And again, almost every signal right here, height seeking, stiff tail, very alert ears with that direct stare, can all be seen in my aroused signals with anxiety as well. Because remember, signals can have multiple meanings. And it may not even be, honestly, that you need to know what emotion the dog is feeling. I don't know that I need to know what anxiety it is, or if it's anxiety, or if it's fear. I think that fears, for most of us, I think we can identify fear better than anxiety. But really, the key is just identifying where they're at in their plane of stress, right? In that mental landscape, so that we can interrupt and move them out of where we don't want them, regardless of what emotion we think they may be surging towards or already experiencing. Okay. Now, other aroused signals, right, that we might see with a fearful dog, and you can see the body language has changed a little bit. So if I back up, bear with me a couple slides, and we have this where we start to have the lowered body language and ears back. We have stress signals, but we're having really some appeasement, displacement, distance increasing, right? All the things saying, hey, I'm worried. I'm worried about stuff. Now we've got a tighter tucked tail. Hackles are raised, so piloerection, right? Ears are pinned back even further. Pupils fully dilated, nose starting to wrinkle, right? So you can see kind of the progression or the escalation of the intensity of the signals here. This is when we're stepping in. We don't want us to get any further. We don't want to go down a path that's going to put us where we then have aggressive signals, right? We don't want it tipping over. Arousal, the thing about arousal, again, regardless of the emotion behind it, is that so aroused signals are very closely linked to aggressive signals. It's the step before we're where we don't want to be. So when we start to see those, we need to be reacting to try to prevent us from getting here, right? Because then we have these, and you've seen one of these pictures before because I've used it a lot because it's such a great picture with so many signals. But you have that prolonged side stare with the whale eye, right? You have the scrunched up nose with the growling, the snarling ears pinned back, the lowered body with the snarl, right? And we're going to have a bite, right? Like that's the next part of this ladder of aggressive signals. And so again, our goal is to get in front of it, right? We don't want to have those aggressive signals. We want to be interrupting redirecting, removing the stressor, whatever we need to do to prevent the dog from getting here. And if we recognize, because we're not perfect, and guardians aren't perfect, if we get here, because it's going to happen sometimes. Okay, we recognize we got there. We shouldn't have been there. Whatever we can do to stop the aggressive signaling as quickly as possible, remove ourselves, remove the dog, remove the stressor, whatever it may be, that's what we want to do, right? We just need the connection that is being made to stop. That's the biggest goal. And then once we allow our dog to calm down, which if we have a release of hormones, and we do at this point, take up to 72 hours. So 3 days later, we can maybe try again, or if it's not try again, it's working towards an ultimate goal of trying again, right? So it depends on what the response was or why it happened. But 3 days gives us plenty of time to build a plan to address why we had the aggressive signals. And then to slowly from that plan start to work in a very stepwise fashion towards helping our dog learn a better way to communicate, helping us learn how to better recognize their signals so that we prevent that escalation from happening. It's amazing how much management can do to prevent these scenarios from happening and really just everybody being safe. And the biggest thing too, as far as taking away, being able to look at this and see that signals can show us, again, I use that mental landscape, right? The moving around, the progression of where our dogs are at. But we want to remember that this response, it's instinctual to what the dog is feeling internally and where they have progressed to in their level of stress, right? This is not on purpose. And so I get, for me personally, I tend to be sensitive when people reference dogs as aggressive in general, because aggressive signals are a response. Now, those signals, again, as we said, can become associated to other things, and that's not what we want. But I try to avoid the generalization of a dog's aggressive, because ultimately, this is all normal dog, right? And if we want to teach our dogs a better way to communicate, we want to teach them English, we want to understand their needs and their wants and desires and fears and worries, then we need to be able to interpret body language so we can communicate with them, so we can help them learn ways to address their stress and ultimately prevent those risks so that we can have a happy dog and happy life. So thank you, everybody. That is our webinar today. Before I turn it back over to Morgan, I did want to just quickly add in November, I'm really excited. Our final webinar will actually be us looking at pictures of dogs at their body language and videos, and we will use our chat to work as a group to interpret signals and try to assess where the dog is at on their mental landscape. So Morgan, I will turn it back to you, but I think, do I need to make you host again?
Yeah, make me host if you don't mind. Thank you again, as always, for a wonderful and very informative webinar. Um, I wanted to actually open the floor up to you all. Do you have any questions about everything Kate covered today? I know there's a lot of information.
Oh my goodness, hang on. I'm working on it. Bear with me while we see if
Good.
people hop in questions.
As I think anybody that has sat in on our webinars before is maybe aware, play groups are like my favorite thing in the whole entire world. And so I love, as you're talking, Kate, I'm thinking about all of the things that are flashing in front of me when I'm running a play group, and all of the signals that I'm seeing and just interpreting kind of on the fly. And this is such great information, the way you kind of broke it down, because once you've been doing this for a really long time, you start to just kind of pick up on these things without even necessarily realizing what you're seeing. So having you
Right.
break it like this is just, it's so helpful because it is so many different things that form the whole picture.
It is. It's crazy when I watch my own dogs and I think, oh, I never thought that stressed you, but I guess it might stress
Yeah.
you. I don't know.
Yeah. I one of my favorite things. So Giuliani just said that she particularly liked the piece about arousal signals, and I remember I was not aware of the urogenital check-in until I was actually working on my master's and I
Yeah.
learned about that. And as soon as I learned that there was a word for it and it was an actual thing, I saw it everywhere. And it's one of those things that as soon as you know about it, you will see it all the time. It's fascinating. And it's just such an interesting signal. And sometimes that'll be the only, that'll be the only one you pick up on. And I'm so glad now that I have that tool in my toolkit to know, like, oh, I didn't see anything else going on, but that just happened. Maybe they're feeling some feelings and I need to, monitor a little more closely. Um, when is the third part of this seminar? So we have it for, oh gosh, Kate, do you have the calendar pulled up? I believe it's the
I
third
think it's
Thursday in November.
November 17th or 8th. What's that weekend?
Yeah, let me
It's
see
the
if
third one. It's the week before Thanksgiving,
yep, the third
whenever
Thursday.
that third Thursday is.
Let me just pull up my calendar really fast. That's a great question. Um,
While
it
you're
looks
looking
like,
at that, I'm going to answer the question in here
yeah.
on the arousal state is that space between fear and anxiety just before aggression. Um, so yes, that's what I when I think about stress signals and where dogs are at in their frame of mind, and really I was talking to myself this morning and came up with the mental landscape, and I was like, that's really what it is, because they just kind of move in and out of stuff, and you can literally watch stress escalate. And yes, when you get to those aroused signals, you are just before they're going to tip over right into that fear and anxiety, and you're going to have those aggressive signals. And there, when I say there's like balance, there's this play in that aroused signaling area, because you've got physiologic response, you've got some hormones in here, but there is some play in where a dog is still capable of learning
Mhm.
until they're not. And every dog's a little different there. And that becomes a really hard field to monitor when you're training. So for me, generally, I'm always coaching people to stay below that aroused state, because then I know the dog is learning.
Yeah. I heard, Kate, I'm sure you've probably said this before, and I heard this analogy a long time ago and it always stuck with me. And it's like, take yourself back to elementary school and your teacher's teaching you simple addition, subtraction, whatever. You can learn that, right? You're in this calm environment, you can learn that. But all of a sudden, if you have a fire alarm going off and everyone's rushing into the hallway, and then your teacher's trying to teach you long division, it becomes really hard to learn that because you have all this chaos going on. So I've always kind of had that mental image when I'm thinking about like where dogs are at if they're approaching threshold, and the importance of keeping them under threshold so that they can actually absorb what you're trying to learn.
No, that's a great analogy. I always like the Disney World one with children.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, so children start to become they're excited to go to Disney World, most children, young children, and they get excitement and they're happy, and you kind of see them back and forth. But you'll also see these kids who just they kind of they get so excited that they can't control it, right? And they can't listen and they can't respond. And then the next thing you know, they're in the middle of the road having a temper tantrum because they've literally tipped over the scale with where they're at with their signaling and what they're experiencing. It's a different perspective, but the same concept.
Oh, that's great. That's an excellent illustration. And as someone that actively avoids Disney World for scenes like you just described, I can certainly relate to that. Do you have any advice on a 6-year-old Chorky? Oh my gosh, I don't think I know what a Chorky is.
The
A
Chiweenie
6-year-old
Yorkie, right? I
ch
think Chiweenie or a Chihuahua.
Chihuahua
Chihuahua
York.
Yorkie, right?
Okay.
Yorkie.
Um, who excited pees whenever she sees a man. It's only men. Ooh, all right, Kate.
It's probably how she's 6, so it's probably
Yeah.
a learned behavior at this point, which makes it really, really hard to change. It's not that you can't change it, it's just it's learned, right? So for For me, I would try to teach an incompatible behavior. Um, so I would do everything in my power, one, to make sure she didn't have a full bladder before any men were involved, right? So if I was setting up a training session with a man, we would go outside multiple times to make sure we have gotten rid of as much as possible. Then additionally, I would have the alternative behavior. So, I mean, it's hard, but probably a sit might work best. So, an incompatible behavior would be one that would make it unlikely that she would eliminate or pee if she's performing that behavior, right? So a sit, she would actually be have her full rump on the ground, maybe a lay down all the way, right? And then what I would start to do is expose to a male, but at a distance, because that controls the intensity of stressors, where she's performing the incompatible behavior with as empty a bladder as possible. And then very, very slowly over probably weeks, if not months, we would close that distance um, until eventually she could greet someone. But then we go outside and we come back in and we do our down and then we go outside, right? So we're trying to always like catch it before it's in there. But what you're trying to disconnect is the fact that her body has learned when she sees them to do that. You may not have an emotion attached at this point, or you may. So you have to kind of start back at square one with teaching her what to do when she sees them. Hope that answered the question.
I have a friend that has a very fearful little pitty, cutest thing ever. And she would do the same thing. And she actually taught her a different incompatible behavior. So she taught her paws up. So whenever
Oh,
they were out and about, if she couldn't control the environment or the situation, she would say paws up. And her, like the friend would be watching, scanning all the time, looking for those potential triggers. And if she saw one, she would say pause up and then look at me was also the cue to kind of check in. And so her dog would do this adorable thing where she'd pop up and then she'd look back. And it actually helped her really get over that hump and change the behavior. So uh, it's another fun alternative. She is a trainer. She's very skilled and experienced, so that might be a slightly next level version of what Kate described, but it was really cute watching her dog do it. We had another question come in, and this is another great one. I love this.
I do too.
When a dog is playing and starts sneezing, is that stress or something else?
It could be. But it could just be them overly excited. It could just be part of play. It could be that play is a little stressful for them.
Yep.
I don't, that's the thing about signals, right? Like you have to look at the context. So for me, if I wanted to make sure that the play was what the dog wanted, that they weren't sneezing out of complete stress, this would be a great time to like disengage, walk out of the room, see if the dog follows you. Okay, let's go play a little bit more. To make sure I have their permission, their consent, that they actually want to play with me. But it's probably a combination of arousal, excitement, maybe some small stress about engaging.
Yeah. And I think, and it's important to just to add to that, that it can mean different things for the same dog. My own
Right.
personal dog is super dramatic with all of his signaling,
Oh yeah,
and
he sneezes when you're training with him.
he will sneeze when we're
Yes.
training. He has one kind of sneeze when he's playing with a small dog. He has a different kind of sneeze when he's playing with a large dog. I mean, so it can, again, the whole picture, you have to look at, that piece of it in context of the whole picture.
And it may just be them again communicating. It could be out of
Yep.
excitement. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yep. My boy, it very much there are certain instances when it is absolutely and super excited. He's really into it and having a great time, and he just sneezes. Um, so okay, so we have another one. I usually make sure she's gone
Yeah, this
outside.
is for the Chorky.
Yep, yep, the
So I
Chorky.
would say yes. And the only thing I would suggest doing different, Kelly, is that I would let her go to him instead of him go to her. That's the only thing I would do different. I would have him ignore her and let her go up to him when she is ready. And I bet you'll see this. I bet you'll get right on the path you need to be.
Yep, absolutely. You'll have to let us know. You'll have to report back and let us know how
Yeah.
this goes. I'm curious. We're invested now. We want to know. Lita, you said that it looks like the third seminar is on November 21st, which yes, that is the third Thursday of November. So that's when we'll have the third seminar. And yes, absolutely. You will get everyone. We always email out a link as soon as this uploads to everything. I'll be sending out a link to the recording for this, and it'll also include a link to sign up for the one in November. Also, just for anybody on the call that's not aware, these are all hosted on our website. And you can view any of our webinars at any time and you can share them with anyone that you would like. Just go to our websites. It's towards the bottom of the shelter page. You'll see our you can click in and view all of our webinars. Okay, anyone else? I know we're kind of running up on time here. Want to be respectful of Kate's time, but are there any last minute questions? Thanks, Kelly. Yeah,
No.
we know. And also really appreciate a picture because I don't know that I have personally ever seen a Chorky. And now I need to know what this is like. And I certainly could Google it, but I'd love to see your Chorky instead. So, okay, if no one else has any questions, then I think that we will be done for today. She actually looks like a Yorkie. Okay.
Thank you, everybody, so much.
Yes, thanks everyone. Thank you, Kate. Wonderful as always.
Bye, guys.
Bye.